Welcome to the Glorious Beard Podcast. It's Christmas time, which means that things tend to slow down a little, the lights go up, and for this episode, Santa Claus is here. In fact, in this episode, Santa Claus is going to walk Tyler through a history of Christmas, and Santa's going along for the ride, helping to connect where these traditions come from and why they've stuck around for so long. We'll also be spending some time to talk about Santa's beard because you can't really separate the two. The modern image of Santa with the red suit and the white beard and all of that is a fairly recent invention, but the beard itself has always done a lot of the work. And since it's cold out, we'll also talk about a newer seasonal trend of the crochet beards. They started popping up more in the last decade, partly practical, partly playful. Some people use them as a face warmer, while others use them as a costume piece and a weird way to keep your beard without freezing your face. They're functional and handmade and tied to the winter culture. To bring everything together, we'll be joined by someone who lives the season all year round. Our guest today is professional Santa Claus Richard Crossman. Richard has spent years portraying Santa, working with families, events, communities, and more, and taking the role very, very seriously as both a performance and a responsibility. He knows the history, the symbolism, and yes, the upkeep that comes with wearing the beard and the suit. So, grab your favorite Christmas snack and join us as we get into the conversation. Welcome and thank you for listening to The Glorious Beard. My guest today is Richard Crossman. He is a professional voice actor and also a professional Santa Claus and happiness maker. Richard, welcome to The Glorious Beard.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I want to start way back, of course. You've led an incredible life, it seems. And I want to start, you've talked about growing up around creativity, around art, sewing, music, art in general, learning things from your grandmothers in the same way that a lot of us in our generation have. When you think back to those times as a young boy, what do you feel were the most important things that were kind of planted inside of you? What sticks with you that you maybe came to realize later on in life?
Well, first and foremost was my love of music. I spent a lot of time with my maternal grandmother, who was a church musician and a soloist, and I got to experience a lot of her music, and she encouraged me in my musical career, and I've used my musical career all my entire life. I've also learned to use my hands. The same grandmother was a wonderful cook and baker. My dad's mother was a knitter and a crocheter, and I learned how to knit and crochet from her at a very young age. I don't knit, although I can. I don't like it, but I still do crochet, and it's a very relaxing thing for me. And then my love of reading. My maternal grandmother started me reading using National Geographic. So
I did.
And that also gave me a real interest in all of the things that are happening around the world, both in history and in current times.
I did read that about National Geographic, and that seems to me to be something. I mean, maybe you could talk to me about around what age that was and maybe how it gave you a different perspective on the world than your friends and schoolmates?
Well, I don't remember exactly when it started. It was probably, way back. But around the age of 4 or 5, it was before I was in school. I do know that. We would sit on the couch, we'd open up National Geographic, we'd look at the pictures, and then if it was a picture of an elephant, she'd show me the word elephant. If it was a picture of a tiger or whatever else it was, she'd show me the word. If it was a mountain or a volcano or whatever, she'd show me the word, and we'd go over it a few times. And eventually I started picking up words and being able to put string words together from that. And, we did the see Dick, see Jane, see Spot thing too with, school and all that. But by the time I got to school, I was reading at a grade 2, 3, 4 level. So
There is a great value in that, isn't there? Because
yeah.
if I were to think about my grandmother and the influences, and many of us we can think about our grandmothers and the influences they put on our lives. It goes far beyond what we could ever imagine.
And I remember too, she struck, because we were working with National Geographic, I gained an interest in what was happening in various areas of the world. A lot of National Geographic back in those days was South America, Central America, Africa, that sort of thing. And I got involved in reading that, in exploring that, and I became a real fan of Egyptology, and I am to this day. Some of my most favorite issues of National Geographic was on Egyptology, and then there were the dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs.
As we all do, yeah. As we all do. You talked to me before about your love of music, and at one point in time you were actually heading towards becoming a music teacher.
Mm-hmm.
How, I mean, because music is a big thing for me as well. It's one of the biggest things, really, if not the biggest thing. How do you get to the point where you want to become a music teacher? Like, you have to trust your instincts. Tell me about that moment when you got to that point.
It was a very gradual thing, actually. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a teacher. And it varied. Sometimes it was history, sometimes it was geography, sometimes it was other things. Never mathematics and never science. But anyway. And then because of music and my love of music, and I actually started teaching piano lessons to other kids at the age of 13, I thought that would be kind of an interesting career to go into. And our school did not have a school band, but a friend of mine was a music teacher in a high school, and I was able to go in on sometimes and sit with him while he taught. And I thought this would be really, really cool because I heard the bands playing. When I enrolled in university for music as a career, as a music teacher, one of the things that really set things in my mind very quickly was a 2-week internship. They sent us out to various places, and I was able to take 2 weeks with George, and realized very quickly, having gone through all of the band rehearsals and all of the squeaky notes and all of the other stuff, that was not going to be for me. If a music performance does not go well, I feel embarrassed for the artist.
Mm.
And that was very difficult for me, was to sit there and listen to the kids struggling and struggling and struggling. So I decided that wasn't the route I wanted to go. I'm very encouraging one-on-one. I will work with you one-on-one, and I taught piano and theory for decades. But as far as a group situation, not so much. I'm a choir director. I've done that for decades as well. That's a little different story because in most cases, we've got people who understand a little bit about where music is going, and they're using their body as the instrument as opposed to a reed instrument or a woodwind or a brass or whatever, where there's opportunity for too many mistakes. Let's put it that way.
What what were your influences when it came to the piano? Were you more into like boogie woogie, classical? I mean, what were you listening to at the time that influenced the way you played?
Well, as my grandmother was a church organist, sacred music was basically my first love. But my family was I was also into theater and musical theater and things like that, but the old stuff, Gilbert and Sullivan operettas,
Mm.
because that's what my grandmother grew up with. She was born in England and came to Canada when she was 12 or 14 years old. So she had recordings of that and music from those things. So that was some of the first things I started to play. Um, and then my parents and my dad's family were very much into Frank Sinatra, the Andrews Sisters, Bing Crosby, the crooners, Perry Como. So I started playing a little bit of that as well. And one of the things that my music teachers absolutely hated, my piano teachers, was I would go in on Saturday morning, I would play my pieces for the piano teacher. I would come home, I would stash the books in the piano bench and play absolutely anything else I could get my hands on. And then Saturday morning, an hour before lesson, I'd pull out my lesson stuff and go over that and try and fake my way through a lesson. And I knew I wasn't. The teachers knew I wasn't. But anyway, we got through it.
I literally watched a documentary last night about the Beatles and how they came to, how they were coming kind of to the end of their career. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do. They want to record this live album. Paul is sitting at the piano talking to their sound engineer, I think, and he said something that kind of struck me. He said the piano is every instrument combined into one. What do you think about that?
I would say to a degree that is correct. However, there is one instrument that is even more every instrument in one, and that is the organ.
Yeah.
Whether it's a synthesized organ or the ones they have now where they've sampled organ sounds from different massive cathedrals all over the world, and they're called Hauptwerk. And then you can call up whatever organ it is you want, or whether it's the massive organ at Wanamaker organ in Philadelphia at the shopping center, or whether it's the massive, the world's biggest pipe organ at Boardwalk Hall in New Jersey. There's not much you can't do with an organ.
I've been to Philadelphia. I lived in Philadelphia for a short time, and I know that organ you're talking about. It's amazing to listen to. That's really cool. You go on in life, and you've lived in what seems like a plethora of places, from small towns to bigger cities. It's almost like it's almost like a nomadic lifestyle. And then you moved back home to help out family, as any good person would do. After let's say, being on the road, for lack of better terms, for so long, moving about, coming back home and doing that had to have changed you in certain ways. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I started out in a small town of 1,250 people where everybody knew what you were doing and who you were and all of that stuff, or in some cases, who you were doing. And then I moved to the bigger cities. And then I came back, and the town I'm in now is about 25,000 people, I think. It's a very rural area. It's greenbelt farmland, so they can't develop anything around where I live. It's all farmland. So it was a very different attitude, very different atmosphere from the big city that I was living in at the time. But at the same time, I miss sort of the hustle and bustle, and I miss the ease of getting to places because I'm an extra hour away from everything that I need to be, or everywhere I need to be in most cases. But coming home, and I say home, it wasn't my home, it was my mother's home. She lived here for 35 years before things deteriorated. And I was with her for about a year before we had to move her into a senior's residence, and now she's in long-term care with dementia. But it was a real, in a lot of ways, it was a culture shock. In some ways, it was like coming back home, because the original town I lived in was, again, a rural town, farmland all around. So it was kind of a full circle-ish situation.
Do you have a favorite place that you've ever lived?
Oh, goodness. I would have to say that every place I've ever lived, there have been aspects of it that I have really enjoyed. I would not want to go back to that little tiny town I grew up in. Too many changes, and the old saying that you can't go back home. Well, yeah, you can't go back home because it's not home anymore.
Yeah.
I lived in Burlington, Ontario for quite a long time, and I had a beautiful townhouse there. And I think of all the places that I lived, that was my favorite one.
I've heard a lot of great things about Canada. I've never been there myself, and for somebody who's never been there, what would you say about where you lived, maybe outside of the normal things that made it great?
Oh, goodness. Well, for one thing, our crime rates are fairly low, relatively low. We certainly don't have to worry about violence with firearms and that kind of thing. For the most part, there's the odd thing that shows up, but we might have, I think the worst we've ever had in the city of Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada, we had a summer where there were 50 shootings, and that was a whole year. So, yeah, I know.
That's pretty
Um,
impressive, really. I don't want to say
yeah,
impressive, but I mean it is.
yeah, yeah. Um, people people all over the world are friendly in some ways. They're not so friendly in other ways. Um, it's 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 just a very different atmosphere. I've never lived in the U.S. I have visited the U.K. I've visited the U.S. If I had the opportunity, I would like to live longer term in the UK, either Scotland or England, because of the historical aspects of that place, not so much the economic aspects. One of the things I like about Canada is that our economy is fairly stable. It's not the best economy in the world, but it's fairly stable. And we don't have a lot of fluctuations like they do in the UK and like you guys do down in the States. So to me, that's probably one of the best things. I know that my dollar will buy what my dollar will buy, I think.
Right. Right, yeah. This episode of the Glorious Beard podcast is sponsored by Men Matter & Co. Confidence, care, respect, because men matter. As if making your beard extra shiny and awesome wasn't enough, Men Matter & Co. are also out there making an impact in men's lives through supporting mental health charities with every sale that they make. So, give your beard the business and feel good that you're making a difference where it counts, because men matter. In fact, we here at The Glorious Beard are partnering with Men Matter & Co. to give our listeners the opportunity to make a difference and show that you care as well by using our promo code GLORIOUSPOD for 15% off at checkout. That's when you go to menmatterandco.com. 15% off using our promo code GLORIOUSPOD at checkout, and a portion of the proceeds from every sale go to men's mental health charities. Self-care is self-respect, because men matter.
The holiday season is upon us here at the Glorious Beard. It's a time of year when people, hopefully, get a little more loving, a little more caring, and a little more bearded? Well, maybe. But there is one person who always comes at this time of year with a little extra on his face. Santa Claus.
Ho, ho, ho!
While there are a variety of holiday traditions that happen at this time of year, we have decided to focus on Christmas traditions. But Christmas has many traditions that go back to pagan rituals that existed long before Christianity. The tree, the mistletoe, even the time of year for the celebration are all directly tied to the pagan holiday of the winter solstice. In today's day and age, traditions like these, and of course the famous Santa Claus legends, go with Christmas like milk and cookies. But where did Santa Claus come from? Well, he is a fictionalized version of the Christian Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas was a 3rd century Greek saint who was born in the village of Patara in Asia Minor. The son of wealthy Christian parents in a Roman Empire that was still predominantly pagan, Nicholas would become orphaned at a fairly young age. But rather than use his inheritance to help himself, young Nicholas would instead give to the needy. Being a prominent Christian bishop in a pagan Roman Empire, Nicholas was constantly being challenged. He would eventually be exiled and imprisoned for his faith. However, he did inevitably return to the church and served at the famed Council of Nicaea, where he notoriously slapped a heretic. He had made a name for himself, and after Nicaea, Nicholas travelled all over the world helping and giving to people. This is why he also became known as the patron saint of travellers. Following his nearly endless travels, he would return to the town of Myra, in which he served as a bishop and died in December of 343 AD. In 1445, Nicholas was canonized and made a saint.
Ho, ho, ho! Sorry to interrupt. This is a beautiful story, but I can't help but notice you haven't mentioned the glorious beard.
Well, Santa, your image, that we know and love, got its beard from St. Nicholas too. St. Nicholas is always depicted as having a long, flowing white beard. Nicholas was a bishop in the Eastern Church. These bishops always had beards, and jolly old St. Nick was among the earliest. Nicholas was supposed to be among the wisest men in the early church, and much like many ancient wise men, his beard is always depicted as full and white, just like your awesome visage. Nicholas's beard was a perfect metaphor for who he was, what he did, and his lasting impact that endures to this day.
Wonderful. Ho, ho, ho! So the beard tells its own story. I think I've heard that somewhere around here. Please tell us more.
Okay, sure, Santa. Well, today we remember St. Nicholas's charity and his wisdom as being part of why we equate him to you. But why as Santa Claus? Well, the Dutch name for St. Nicholas was actually Sinterklaas, which would later be anglicised into the Western world as Santa Claus by English settlers to the New World. Then finally, popular early American author Washington Irving referred to you as Santa Claus in his History of New York in 1809, writing about the traditions brought to New York by the original Dutch colonists. The name would stick, and your legend was born. St. Nicholas's legacy has lasted forever in the form of Santa Claus. And Santa's legend is more than that of a compulsive gift giver who slides into your home through the chimney every December 24th. It's the continuation of a tradition where virtues like kindness, charity, compassion, and wisdom stand the test of time. And at the Glorious Beard, we want to remind you that Santa Claus is more than a media mogul, and more than just a fun holiday movie starring Tim Allen.
That's right. Thank you for showing the world my real story. And have a wonderful holiday season. Ho, 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 ho.
My guest on the program today is Richard Crossman. He has taken a great amount of generosity in being with us today here on The Glorious Beard. Richard, we've talked about some of the skills and the things that you acquired when you were growing up, things that you learned from your grandmother, experiences in life. And you went on to basically use every one of those skills in a different capacity in many, many different jobs, cultures, environments. Just kind of walk me through this cornucopia of lifestyles that you've led. We'll put it that way.
Well, I've often said I'm on career number 14 or 15 at this point, but I'm not sure that's accurate anymore. And many of them have been concurrent. As I mentioned earlier, my grandmother was a baker, and I went on to become a chef and a pastry chef. And I worked in hotels and private clubs for a number of years. Then I taught commercial baking and pastry arts for 20 years in a high school. A technical school, one of only 8 programs in the province at that time, and one of the 2 most respected of those programs. I had articulations with the Ministry of Education so that students could go directly from my class into an advanced apprenticeship program. I taught as an itinerant when I retired from that job at a community college in baking and pastry arts. So there's my baking, my pastry, my teacher, my chef, and all during that time, because of my grandmother's music influence, I started my career as a church musician, as an organist and choir director at the age of 17. And this year I have just finished 50 years in September. I celebrated 50 years nonstop as a church organist and choir director,
Wow.
33 years in the same building. So that's been an ongoing thing. Conducted a few community choirs over the years, including the Halton Region Police Choir. And we used to go down to Cleveland in I think it was Memorial Day weekend, maybe, or was it the weekend before? Might have been the weekend before. That was in the late 80s, early 90s, where we celebrated the lives of those police officers who perished on the job, along with other choirs and police pipe and drum bands and all of that sort of thing. It was a real pleasure and privilege to be part of that. My father was a bit of a woodworker. My grandfather was a bit of a woodworker on my dad's side. There was a time when I was very involved in woodworking, making furniture for my home, making clocks. I didn't do the actual works of the clocks, but I made the clock cases.
Right.
I made jewelry boxes. There was a time when I was building, the Santa Claus statues that you can get in the stores and so on. I was sculpting the hands and the faces out of polymer clay and then creating those Santa dolls. My mother was a seamstress and a sewing teacher, and she taught us all how to sew. And when I was working in theater, wardrobe found out I could sew, and I got seconded to wardrobe quite often.
Mm-hmm.
And that grew into a situation where I became the assistant costumer for a Renaissance fair, the only big Renaissance fair here in Canada, for 7 of the 8 years I was involved in the thing, although I was also an actor, portraying various historical characters. And from that grew another 25 years as a costume designer and builder for film and television, theater, and circus. And my last major TV project was building 90% of the kimonos and hakama pants for a Netflix show called The Age of Samurai, which aired just before COVID. And I'm still doing that. Not so much for TV and film anymore. I do a lot of one-off commissions. My very first acting performance was narrating "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," that classic poem, at the age of 3 in a show. We have a photograph which we found last summer, year ago now, in my mother's photo albums as we were cleaning out some of her things, of me at 9 years old in a Santa Claus suit distributing Christmas gifts. This is my 40th year as a professional Santa, but I did it as a non-professional for years before that. So
Yeah.
Christmas Santa Claus is in my blood. I create all of my own Santa costumes, and most of the commissions I do now are costumes for other Santa Clauses. I've done 50 or 55 over the last 8 or 10 years. I do 4 or 5, 6 a year, depending on what's going on, and then other commissions as they come in. So those are some of the careers I've had. And then I spent 30 years in opera and musical theater. Concurrent with all that other stuff that was going on, there were times when I slept 3 and 4 hours a night for weeks on end because I was in rehearsal, I was in a show, I was creating whatever it was I was creating, and on it went. So,
Well, I was going to ask you, when do you sleep now?
well, I generally try for about 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night at this point. But because of the voiceover, which I started in 2019, a lot of auditions come in fairly late in the evening from the west coast of the United States or Australia or Asia. So I often don't get to bed till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning now, and sometimes later than that. So it just depends what's going on.
You have done a lot of costuming and sewing, but it's not always gone well for you. I relate to your plight though. There was one time when I pulled up to a gas station and I was driving a rental car and I didn't know which side the gas thing was on. So initially I pulled up to the wrong side and I thought, oh, I need to turn around. So I turned around and I came around the other side and I was still in the same predicament. And I thought, oh, I need to turn around. And when I turned around and came back, a car was there. I was like, oh, I'll pull over to that pump. And I pulled to that pump. I'm still on the wrong side. You sewed a sleeve backwards 3 times. Is that right?
It was the night before the opening of one of our Renaissance years. I can't remember whether it was the second or the third year I was the assistant costumer. And I was desperately trying to get this very specific shirt done for one of the characters. He had to have it, and I had to be at the festival at 8 o'clock in the morning to open the wardrobe. So I was rushing along, put both sleeves in, realizing after I put them in, because I always checked, that they were on backwards. So I took them off, turned the shirt inside out again, reattached the sleeves, turned it back right side out again to realize that I'd done exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so take those off, put the sleeves back on again, except that I forgot to turn the shirt inside out. So I had the inside of the sleeves on the outside of the shirt. So those now have to come off, and it's 3:30 in the freaking morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
I finally settled in, got everything sorted out. I actually took and pinned the sleeves in place so that I could make sure everything was right before I did the final stitching. It was fine. I finished up about 4:15, got 2 hours sleep, 2.5 hours sleep, and headed into the festival for 8 o'clock so I could open the wardrobe. And the guy came in, he says, "This shirt is amazing."
Never knowing what you went through to make it, right? That's great.
There are days.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. What is your because I've been to some Renaissance fairs myself. I don't get so much into the costumes as much as I am kind of fascinated with medieval times and the culture of it and the history of it and things like that. Do you have a favorite thing about it, or maybe, because things like that tend to be more about the experiences that you have with people.
Mm-hmm.
And in that environment, I'm sure you've had a lot.
Well, I was very fortunate in that I worked with probably one of the top Renaissance fair production companies in North America, Maryland International Renaissance Fair, out of Crownsville, Maryland. They came up to Canada. There was nothing in Ontario. There's nothing east of British Columbia. At that point, there was a small fair in British Columbia, but that was the only one in Canada. So they bought a piece of property and started building. I was not involved in the first year, but I was in the second year. And they were very much into historical accuracy for the cast, for the storyline, for everything. So I was very fortunate in that because I was a real history lover. And as an actor, I'd done some Shakespeare at that point. It was great. And the costumes were amazing. The woman who was the head of the wardrobe for Maryland was also our head and my boss in the second and third years, Cindy Anderson, who also did costumes for, I believe it was the Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's what it was. It was quite some time ago now, 30 years ago almost. But because of that, I learned how to build costumes for that type of thing, for interactive theater, as opposed to just looking good 40 feet away on a stage. But because of the way they approached the fair, there were amazing, amazing interactions with other cast members, and most of the cast members I'm still friends with now 30 years later. And a lot of the people that were at those fairs, we are still in connection with from time to time. There are other festivals up here. When Crownsville, or when Maryland IRF closed the Canadian one in 2004 for a variety of reasons, other festivals popped up, and I was part of a few of those festivals for a while, playing Henry II, Richard I, Henry VIII, various characters. There just wasn't the same professionalism involved in a lot of it. But the experiences were still wonderful. And again, a lot of the cast migrated from festival to festival. And as I say, we're still in touch now, and I still do a couple of medieval festivals a year, both as if not the costumer, as a costume consultant, and as an actor. But yeah, I'm still in touch with dozens of people that we met during those years in the Ontario Renaissance Fair. So,
What would you say the most important thing is about those friendships, about those connections to people? What's the most important thing for you?
well, first and foremost is that you develop a solid foundation, and as actors, we do that. We have to, because we rely on each other on stage or in a performance. If something goes wrong, somebody has to figure out how they're going to get us out of it. And I've fluffed lines a couple of times in shows, and people have gotten me out of it, and I've done the same thing for others. So we become very close, and I won't say dependent on one another, but very much relying on one another. Let's put it that way. When we're dealing with people who come to the fair, the patrons of the fair, it's an extended building up of relationships. Guy Gavriel Kay, who is an amazing author, many of you will know who he is, used to bring his son to the Renaissance Fair. And after the second year, they would come specifically to see me. And I have stayed in touch. I'm not as close as I would like to be, because things have just taken us in different directions. But once a year, once every 18 months, I send off a note to Guy, and he will respond. So it's a long building of a relationship over 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons, and then that relationship continues to develop, or you let it go. It's up to you. And there are those who you become very close to, and there are those who I can still say, "Hey, how you doing?" But don't know every aspect of their life. So it like any other friendship, I guess it depends on the depth of the relationship you've got.
You are listening to the Glorious Beard Podcast. Thanks for doing that. You can find us online on Instagram and other places by searching The Glorious Beard, and visit our website, thegloriousbeard.com. Christmas time brings a lot of trends. People like to wear ugly sweaters, they like to drink eggnog, they go to family and friends' houses, they do pub crawls. There's all kinds of things. But one thing that's popped up recently has been the trend of the crocheted beard. And apparently, even babies are getting in on it.
Stockings full of goodies line the fireplace mantel. A tree covered with ornaments and tinsel stands proudly in the corner. Holiday cheer is in the air, which can mean only one thing. Christmas time is here! But of course, along with the presents and the smiles, there's one more unforgettable thing about Christmas time: the cold weather. And if you ask me, what better is there to combat Jack Frost from nipping at your nose than with a glorious beard? What's that? You can't grow a beard? Or maybe you don't want to deal with the daily maintenance that a glorious beard requires. Or perhaps you just want a fun and quirky way to keep your face warm for the winter season. Well, have no fear, because I have the perfect solution for you: a crochet beard. Now, if you're anything like me, then you might not know the difference between crocheting and knitting. So let's go over that real quick. You see, the grannies in the classic cartoons welding 2 knitting needles and a giant basket are knitting, not crocheting. The word crochet is actually a French word, which means hook, because you use a hook. Super creative name, right? But besides the tools of the trade, there are a few key differences between knitting and crocheting.
Crochet differs from knitting in that in crocheting, you're actually not creating a stitch, but you're looping the yarn and creating a little knot. If you ever get the chance to look at knitted and crocheted fabric close up, you will really see the difference.
There's a few different aspects to crocheting that make it the ideal choice for a beginner. In crochet, you only have a single hook to keep track of, not two needles. And in crochet, you're only working with a single stitch at a time, so fixing mistakes can be a lot simpler than in knitting. However, when it comes to knitting, you'll find that there's a bit more patterns available to you, likely because 1. Knitting is about 6 centuries older than crocheting, and 2. Knitting is better at producing intricate patterns and fabrics. So, for items like socks, knitting might be the better choice over crocheting. But it's a good thing we're not crocheting socks, right? We're trying to crochet a glorious beard. Perhaps the best part about crocheting your very own glorious beard is that it can be just about any color you want. Do you want a lime green beard? I'm not sure why you would, but hey, with crocheting, that's an option. And not only that, you can also customize the length and style of the beard too. If you're wanting something more low-key, then you can follow a puff stitch pattern for a beanie beard combination that wraps around your jaw, keeping it nice and warm. Or maybe low-key isn't exactly your style, and you want a beard as long as the Vikings. Then you're in luck, because there's also more costume-like patterns you could follow that utilize long, dangling threads to give yourself the perfect Gimli-style drapery on your face. And if you're looking for a more fuzzy beard that looks like a squirrel sleeping on your lip, you could even use a faux fur yarn to give it that extra little bit of oomph to your beard. Needless to say, the only limit to a crochet beard is your imagination.
All about that beard, no stubble. All about that beard, no stubble. All about that beard, no stubble. All about that beard.
So, if you can't grow a glorious beard for this cold season, then a crochet beard may be just for you. Or maybe you're looking to have the best Santa beard for your work Christmas party. Or maybe you have a pair of busy hands that are itching for a new hobby to do. But one thing's for sure, regardless of your reason, crocheting is a hobby that will welcome you with open arms. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm going to try and crochet a glorious beard of my own. Happy holidays, everyone!
You are listening to the Glorious Beard Podcast. My guest on this episode, because it's Christmas time, is Richard Crossman, who is a professional Santa Claus performer, voice actor, and so many other amazing things. Richard, I guess I should go back and ask you, because I failed to do so, how did you get started as being Santa? Like, how did it become... I don't want to say a job because I'm sure you don't treat it like a job. How did it become something that you embraced?
To me, Santa Claus is a calling. As nurses and doctors and other professionals feel a calling, teachers, Santa Claus to me is a calling. And as I say, my very first performance was a recitation. This was the night before Christmas, and at 9 years old, I have a picture of me in a Santa suit handing out Christmas gifts. I always tell people, Santa Claus is in my blood. When I got to be a little older, late teens, early 20s, I had a couple of requests from people, could I do Santa Claus for a small event? So I at that point, I bought myself a very cheap suit and a fake beard and a fake wig, and it looked like crap. I don't have a picture of it, thank goodness. But I did Santa Claus for them, and it just sort of grew out of that. And for about 7 or 8 years, I did that as a sort of an ad hoc on request sort of thing. And then when I hit 28, 29, I made myself a Santa Claus suit and took my first 2 paid gigs, and it just blossomed from there. I have never done a shopping center. I shouldn't say that. I did a shopping center for one afternoon for a friend of mine a number of years ago and said I would never do that again. In the year of COVID, 2020, I was tapped to be the Santa Claus at the Eaton Centre, one of Canada's 2 largest shopping malls, and probably one of the most prestigious. But I got pulled out of the chair 12 hours before I was supposed to take it because of COVID shutdown. And I decided not to go back and do that the next year when they came back to me. And I'm glad I didn't, because it was, to me, Santa Claus is all about talking to the kids, talking to the families, having some interaction. And in the malls, it's sell the pictures, sell the pictures, sell the pictures. We've got to get them through. We've got to get them through. Whether they're buying pictures or not, we just have to get them through as quick as we can. And that, to me, is not Santa Claus. That's a commercial enterprise. And kudos to all my Santa Claus brethren who do the malls and the shopping centers. It's a skill that you guys have that I don't have. I would much rather take my time at a corporate event, a community event where I get to greet people, whether it's a home party, a home visit, whatever. A Santa Claus parade. I've done a couple of those, but I like to be able to get down and greet people and talk to them. And one of my favorite events that I do every year is a huge artisan craft show. There's 130 vendors in a massive building. And I'm there as Santa Claus for the full 3 days. And over those 3 days, every 2 hours, I'm changing costumes into something else. But I also have the time to talk to vendors and to people who are there at the show to purchase. And a lot of them bring their kids. So I get a chance to take pictures with the kids, but I get a chance to talk to the kids. I had a lady last weekend, which is when the event was, not this past, but the week before, who was 89 years old, who'd never had a picture with Santa Claus.
Wow.
And she wanted to sit on my lap and have a picture with Santa Claus. Last year, I had a fellow who was a rugby player, 300 pounds, 6'8". He'd never had a picture with Santa Claus. He wanted to sit on my knee too. We did it. And then I had a 2-week-old baby handed to me, and with a bottle, and I was feeding this 2-week-old baby. And when we were done and the parents had taken the pictures, she didn't want to leave. She was snuggled into my fur and my velvet suit. She didn't want to go. She cried when Mom picked her up. That's the kind of interaction I get when I'm not doing them all.
In the United States, the mall culture is practically dead. I mean, you could put a tombstone on almost every mall. Of course, not Mall of America and all of that, but everywhere else, it's like... And traditionally, the culture of the Santa has been the mall Santa, the corner Santa with Salvation Army bucket, that kind of thing. Where are all these Santas going now? Like, what is going on with the Santa culture, so to speak?
Well, there are still a lot of stores, individual stores. We still have a fair number of malls here in Canada. We haven't killed off all the malls yet. Some of them have gone from indoor malls to outdoor shopping centers, where each store is individual. But we still have a fair number of malls. But there are a lot of individual stores that will bring in Santa Claus now. We have sporting goods stores, massive. Bass Pro. I think you folks have them there too.
Yeah.
They often have a Santa Claus. Some of the pet stores will bring in Santa Claus. But I'm finding that a lot of places that have Santa or want Santa can't get them because we don't have enough.
Santa shortage then.
Santa shortage here.
Wow.
Last week, I got 9 requests for Santa Claus on weekend days, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday nights in December. But all of my time has been booked since March, and I'm
Right.
already booking into 2027
Yeah, I would
because I
imagine.
have clients that keep coming back. So
I would
by
imagine, yeah.
February, March, I will be booked out for the year probably, other than weekdays. I do weekdays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I will get schools, I will get charity events, things like that, and I love doing them. But weekends, if you don't book early, you're done.
Mm. Yeah, and I can imagine, you were talking about holding the baby and the rugby player, the elderly woman. You've had to have had some incredibly emotional events over the
Hmm.
years as Santa. What have
Hmm.
been some of those things that have really impacted you?
Oh, goodness. I hope I can hold it together. For 6 years, I had 6 ladies that would come and do Santa Claus every year. And last year, one of them passed.
Oh, wow.
So the 5 came as a tribute to her.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that, Richard. That's that's got to be big. That's got to be a big thing.
We used to laugh and joke and all kinds of stuff and have fun and take weird pictures and all kinds of things. And then last year, just before Christmas, in fact, it was early November, she passed, and the ladies came in to do the show and came into the show to do the pictures, and it was just devastating.
Mm. Those personal connections that you make through what you do,
Yeah.
I think are more important than anything.
Oh, no question.
Yeah, that's great. Um, what do you see the future of not only your work as Santa Claus? Like, what do you think that you could achieve as Santa that you haven't yet?
Well, I've got 2 new Santa suits I want to make for next year,
Yeah.
different from the ones I have. But I know most of my colleagues, I won't say all of them because I don't know all of them, but most of my colleagues, the ones I know well, are working to make the world a better place, a kinder place. It's hard, but that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to shift gears just a little bit because we've got just a little bit of time. We like to ask every guest a certain list of questions. And because when you have a beard and in beard culture, there are a lot of kind of, let's call them misconceptions about things like masculinity, what makes a man, that kind of thing. And a man with a beard is seen in a certain light. There's a certain amount of masculine expectation. So I like to ask this of all of my guests. What is masculinity, Richard? I mean, you as a man with a beard, having all of these different experiences, being in all these different places, what is the truth? What is true masculinity?
To me, masculinity is having the confidence within yourself to treat everybody kindly. The macho bullshit doesn't work for me. To me, that's just insecurity. You have to be confident. You have to love yourself so that you can treat others kindly and well and accept them for who they are. That to me is masculinity. Not looking down on somebody, not mistreating somebody because they look different or they act different or whatever. My grandparents instilled that in me, even though they were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants in small towns, it was always treat everybody kindly. Treat everybody well. Doesn't matter what they look like, doesn't matter who they are. We don't know what those people are going through. We have no idea what they've been going through. Treat them kindly, because you might be the only kind thing that happens to them today. And I've taken that philosophy through my life. I've had times when I've been a miserable prick at times, but for the most part, and certainly in the last 30 years, my philosophy is, if you treat everybody kindly, if you treat them equally, and don't try and put people down, that to me is true humanity, never mind masculinity.
For the last thing, Richard, I'm going to ask you to channel Santa Claus, because we have a lot of boys, girls, and others in our community. And for it being Christmas, they could use a little bit of Christmas cheer. We all could this time of year. It's a hard time of year for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And here at the podcast, we like to focus on mental health. In fact, we partner with a mental health beard care company called Men Matter & Co. Mm-hmm. So it's a big thing for us to really kind of focus on people. Not so much what we do in this media landscape, but focus on people. So if you could channel Santa Claus and give all of the good listeners out there a message of Christmas joy, I think we would all appreciate it.
Well, as I say, in my Santa Claus persona, it doesn't matter what you are going through. You are not alone if you choose to approach somebody. Find somebody that you can approach, that you can share with, so that you are not alone. Know that there are people out there who are ready and willing to support you in whatever difficulty you're having. There are all kinds of resources out there. There are all kinds of people out there. Even talk to a Santa Claus. We're there to make Christmas cheerful and joyful as much as we can. We will support you in every way we can. So have a wonderful holiday season. And I know it's hard for people. People lose family members this time of year. People have other situations that have come up. Maybe they're not able to be in a home at this particular time. Maybe they're homeless. Maybe they've got a drug problem. Maybe you've got an alcohol problem. There are people out there who can help if you reach out. And we are all willing to help as much as we possibly can. So don't be alone this season. There are people who are there to help.
Thanks for listening to the Glorious Beard Podcast. Our guest today was Richard Crossman, professional Santa Claus performer, and really so many more things. You can find Richard on Instagram at Richard Crossman VO. Our production director at JXB Media is Bob McCoy. Our executive producer is Joseph Kay. Our associate producers were Damian Miller and Sabrina Dene. The writers on this episode included Nathan Richards, Joseph Kay, and Morgan Horvath. Production responsibilities were handled by Abby Yaffe and Bob McCoy, and the smooth voice talents that you heard came courtesy of Anya the Quacken, Tyler Woodburn, Richard Crossman, Damian Miller, and Bob McCoy. Production assistance was provided by Kaylin Graff and Maya Aquino. Our story editor is Joseph Kay. Our assistant story editor is Morgan Horvath. Our social media team is led by Sabrina Dene. They all make a whole bunch of great things, and you can find their excellent work on our Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and more by searching The Glorious Beard. The Glorious Beard is a production of JXB Media, a subsidiary of Top Secret Television Productions. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, follow, and whatever other fun stuff that your podcast platform allows you to do, and find us online at thegloriousbeard.com. Happy holidays, happy Christmas, and happy New Year from all of us here at The Glorious Beard.